All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 43 of the Below the Yellow Line podcast. I'm your host, Joe Laney Pavlon, alongside me, Daniel Ford, and Justin Hebert for tonight. It's 7 o'clock Eastern time, so it's podcast time. And wow, what a race we had at Daytona to
Yeah.
kick off pretty much the majority of all of motorsports with the Rolex 24. It did not disappoint, like most times. How do I put an endurance race in the words, especially the Rolex 24 Daytona?
You probably say entertaining, but that will be simple if you could put it that. But I could just probably you should say exhilarating in a way.
It really was exhilarating because we know every time we come to January at Daytona, you usually expect something new, something broad. Um, for some drivers, this is the beginning of the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship season. Fair to say. For others, this is the beginning of their time racing, whether it's a new team, a new car, a new driver combination, or just getting back on the track for the first time in even years for some of these drivers. Maybe they sat out in 2019 and they finally got a contract in their favor. So let's break it down to what transpired. Cadillac has gone undefeated in the DPI era, which dates back to 2017, and 3 of those 4 wins come from this team and car, Wayne Taylor Racing.
Mm-hmm.
So the DPI, of course, looked like this. The results in order: we had Wayne Taylor Racing number 10, Cadillac finishing first with Ryan Briscoe, Scott Dixon, 2 drivers that came from Chip Ganassi Racing last year, and 2 drivers who were with them when they won in 2019, Kamui Kobayashi and Ranger van der Zand.
Yep.
Just a great lineup. It paid off. They completed a grand total of 833 laps around the Daytona track for the clock of 24 hours, and they beat the fastest car to do it. That would be the number 77 Mazda, driven by Tristan Nunez, Oliver Jarvis, and Olivier Pla.
Also, the number 10 Cadillac led the most laps with 493 of the 833 laps completed around the track. They led 493
of the 833 laps. So that's more than half the race.
Yeah, they led.
Yeah.
And then, of course, for the 77 Mazda, they finished on the lead lap. There were only 3 cars that finished on the lead lap, mind you, because the third place car was the number 5 JDC Miller Racing team, was the Mustang sampling Cadillac, driven by Sebastian Bourdais, Loic Duval, and Joao Barbosa.
Yep.
And they played a great threat in the race too. They
were ahead when the 10 got the penalty, but when the 10 got in the lead lap,
they made it up fast though.
Yeah, like Ryan Briscoe tried. You saw Ryan Briscoe in that 10 making good moves, which really helped.
And he worked twice as hard, I'm sure, out of frustration to be penalized like that. Many saw that as an unfair call, but rules are rules, and he had to serve the penalty.
And they
did it right, and they came back.
Yeah.
And let's move down for the results. Of course, you had my prediction was the number 6 Acura Team Penske. They finished 5 laps down in 4th place. Dan Cameron, Juan Pablo Montoya, Simon Pagino. I thought they were a great lineup to win the race, but the Acuras had some trouble, and they really fought through the adversity and a bad handling car to even get to a 4th place spot. They were 1 position shy of the podium, and 5th place was the number 85 JDC Miller Motorsports machine. So they got 2 cars in the top 5. Those drivers would be Matthias Lace, Chris Miller, Juan Piedrahita, and Tristan Vautier.
Yeah.
Moving down their results of the DPI class, we had the number 55 Mazda, number 31 Wheel and Engineering Cadillac, and the number 7 Acura Team Penske machine. Yep. So guess what? 8 DPIs total were in this race. They all finished top 8 overall, including the number 7 Penske machine.
That had the incident early,
They spent about a good 30 minutes in the garage
and all
and
the
made it
fans
up to finish top 10 overall.
with all the fans taking photos. Yeah, all the
Yeah,
fans
that
taking
was a frustrating moment because they were fast and they had a good shot to win. We'll get into that later because I want to read through the results first of all. Then we'll talk about the race because we have a lot to talk about in the 24 hours at Daytona. So moving on to the LMP2 class, and it was a very competitive race for the LMP2 class, more than what we expected, and especially from what we saw in 2019 when we had only only four cars entered, and they finished laps apart from each other. And even when they had only two cars race in the events that had LMP2s featured, they still finished laps apart.
But this race
We
was
were
not
supposed to have
really.
7. Sorry to cut you off.
It was 8. I know the number 2 pulled out. Rick Ware Racing.
It's your two teams pull out. So we had 5. And
2. Oh yeah, the 51.
yeah.
The 51 and the 2. Yeah.
So the LMP2 results look like this. There was the number 81 Dragon Speed. So Dragon Speed, like Wayne Taylor Racing, repeated victories in their class. They had Colin Brown, Ben Hanley, Henrik Hedman, and Harrison Newey
Yeah.
behind the wheel of that car. They finished 2 laps ahead of the dominant car of the race, which unfortunately they had mechanical problems. That car was the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports Oreca machine, driven by Gabriel Albrain, Nick Buell, Ben Keating, and Simon Trummer. And you got to give credit to Ben Keating, though. In the early stages of the race, he walked away from everyone else in that class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like 80 seconds at one.
At one point, he almost lapped the whole field.
Bill,
And he
I
did.
know.
For a good portion of the race, that car was out in front for that class
Yeah,
until
that
the
was,
mechanical problems happened. Then they
But-
went down to
yeah,
being 4 laps behind.
yeah,
Ben Keating, I give him credit for putting that car way up front.
And for the
Also-
situation he was in.
yeah, exactly. That was that was kind of a dominant performance for that team.
Yeah.
You know, it sets a statement of what can happen
Yeah.
in the championship.
Let's move down to the results. Of course, we'll get into Ben Keating later because he was a pretty interesting driver to talk about, especially if you're in 2 cars and 2 different teams and 2 different classes. Third place and 11th overall for LMP2 class was the number 18 Era Motorsports Oreca machine, driven by Ryan Lewis, Nicholas Minjansen, Dwight Merriman, and Kyle Tilley. Then you move downwards. Welcome back, Starworks. Remember, they had a great prototype challenge car that was in IMSA back when they had the PC class many years ago. They finished 4th in the class. Number 8, Tower Motorsports by Starworks, driven by Ryan Dalziel, longtime driver for Starworks, John Ferrano, David Heinemeyer Hansen, and Nikolai LaPierre. And 5th place in LMP2 class was 27th overall. It's been a struggling day. They actually retired from the race. Was Performance Tech Motorsports with Don Yout, Robert Masson, Kyle Masson, and Cameron Castles. That was number 38. So only 5 cars raced in the LMP2 class.
Yeah.
I'm excited for Sebring. I hope there are more LMP2s, especially since they'll be racing with World Endurance that same weekend. They put on a great show.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to GTLM, and like the other 2 classes, we saw repeat winners. Welcome back to Victory Lane, BMW. This time is number 24 machine.
Yeah.
Number 24 BMW won the race with John Edwards, Augusto Farfus, Jesse Crone, and Chaz Mostert behind the wheel of that car. They put on a tough fight against the 2 Porsches and the number 3 Corvette for most of the race. In fact, that was the most competitive class of the event.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because they had, with GTE competition, it's so tough to get ahead of one another, and they really work like twice as hard because they have bragging rights with their manufacturers. That's what makes factory team racing the fun, exciting competition it is.
Yeah, man, that was awesome.
Yeah.
So hats off to them.
And they did it right before Australia Day, which is a big day, which is celebrated because Chaz Mostert is Australian. So for him to get that victory, that really means something.
That's right. Moving down, second and third place cars was the number 12 and number 911 Porsches. Earl Bamber, Matthew Gemini, Lawrence Vantour, and 912. Matt Campbell, Frederick Makovicky, Nick Tenney, 911. The two classic Porsche driver lineups that we see in racing all around the world. Porsche was tough to beat. I picked the 912 to win. They were just shy of the win. 3 cars finished on the lead lap in this class. Fourth place in the LMGT class was the number 3 Corvette Racing Machine. That was the first race with the all-new C8R Corvette mid-engine. It's the first time a Corvette's ever been a mid-engine, by the way, in its history. Drivers were Nicky Katzberg, Antonio Garcia, and returning driver Jordan Taylor.
Yeah.
And then moving down the results, there were only 7 that took place in the GTLM class. So we had the number 25 BMW that finished 5th in the class. 6th place was alone, number 62 Ferrari.
Scuderia Corsa?
Nope, it's Risi Competizione.
But they do work together.
Yes.
7th place and retired was the number 4 Corvette. They had
mechanical issues with oil pressure regulator failing on them.
Yep.
So yeah, there's that. And lastly, the most diverse class and yet still competitive is the class that has most cars at 18, GT Daytona, which is a GT3 class won by Paul Mueller Racing. This is the only team that did not repeat a victory at the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona from 2019 that has won in their class in 2020. So Paul Mueller Racing scored the GTD win in a Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo. Drivers were Andrea Caldarelli, Corey Lewis, Brian Sellers, and Madison Snow at 765 laps total and 18th overall. Only 2 cars finished on the lead lap in that category. Second place was the number 44 GRT Magnus Racing Team with drivers seasoned such as Andy Lally, Marco Mappelli, Spencer Pumbelli, and John Potter. They had a late race charge that fell short. And third place was the number 88 Audi Sport Team WRT Speedstar R8 LMS Evo, which is a team from Canada. Mirko Bortolotti, Rolf Einichen, Daniel Murad, and Dries Vantour. And then moving down the list, we have Wright Motorsports in the number 16 Porsche 911 GT3R. They finished 4th. Black Swan Racing Porsche number 54. Turner Motorsport BMW M6 GT3. Moving downwards, you have Scuderia Corsa number 63 Ferrari. Heinreicher Racing with Meyer Shank Racing number 57 Acura NSX GT3. Number 14 Ambassador Sullivan Lexus RCF GT3. Meyer Shank Racing with Curb Agajanin number 86 Acura. Number 74 Mercedes AMG team with Riley with Robinson Racing. That's an AMG GT3 Evo, the new 2020 edition, mind you. That was a GTLM. Ambassador Sullivan Lexus. They finished many laps down. Pfaff Motorsports, the dominant car for the early stages up until around the 1 o'clock in the morning. They had mechanical problems. Grasser Racing Team, GRT number 11, Lamborghini. Precision Performance Motorsports, Lamborghini. Number 19, GRT Racing Team, Lamborghini with the DNF. Aston Martin Racing had a tough return as their 2 entries finished last 2 spots. Number 98, Aston Martin Racing, the factory team, and the 23 Heart of Racing team crashed in the tri-oval. So, yeah, there's that. Let's talk about the race. When this race started, who was the favorites?
At the beginning, it was mainly the 77 and the 6. They were up front most of the race in the early part. But during the nighttime, the number 10 came into the picture. That number 10 car came into the picture, and we saw what Kamui Kobayashi did early to get the lead.
That bold move in turn 1 in the night hours.
definitely the number 10 was definitely the
It turned the
favorite.
dial really this whole race. I think that was the changing turning point of the race, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, because at first it was the 77 car, but then after that move, that number 10 came alive and really did good.
And then later on we saw the number 5 JDC Miller machine come into the picture. They actually hung on very well. They finished on the lead lap because they have that veteran experience. You know, Loic Duval, Joao Barbosa, Sebastian Bourdais, they were on fire at one point and duking it out with the number 10, especially heading into the daylight on Sunday.
Yeah.
And it even looked like for a moment that they were going to win because of the penalty the number 10 received during a pit stops under a safety car. Then that resulted in them having a lap advantage over them. But the 10 unlapped themselves based off how fast the driving times were. You put Kamui Kobayashi in the car. Well, actually, no. It was Briscoe that unlapped himself. And then Kobayashi stepped in. And they just never looked back.
Yeah.
So there's that. As for LMP2, we did just talk about it a lot. It was really the 52 car that dominated the race until they had mechanical problems. Although they were coming back, they just needed another hour or two to win the race because they fell one lap too shy of the win. Meanwhile, GTLM, you had a lot of cars in the picture. In fact, I think all cars except for the 62 Ferrari and the number 4 Corvette had a decent shot to win the race.
Yeah, they all had. Also, the 25 could have, but the 25 had issues also. That's why they finished like 16 laps behind.
Yeah, they were actually in the garage for a long time.
Yeah.
And GTD had a lot of drivers that could have, a lot of cars that had a shot to win the race. And a lot of them had issues that took them out of the picture, such as the number 98 Aston Martin Racing car, the 19 GRT Gear Racing Team, the number 9 FAF Motorsports. They all had issues. Well, actually, the 98 had a crash. And then, of course, the 11 and 19 GRT Lamborghinis had mechanical failures. FAF Motorsports had a power outage or something in the car at one point while they were leading. And in fact, the FAF number 9 Porsche had the best lap times of all the cars in the class.
Yeah.
But then later in the race, we saw a good charge by the number 16 Wright Motorsports Porsche, which was way too late. In the Black Swan Racing Porsche. But we did see a lot of presence from the 88 Audi for the GTD lead.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to note the Lamborghinis were fast.
oh yeah, that's definitely a fact, man.
Yep.
You know, when they're going head to head with the Porsches, we had like one Lamborghini catch on fire, and that was with Christina Nielsen.
Yeah.
And that was kind of unfortunate. We also had another one have an oil pressure regulator problem, and he got towed back to the pits.
Number 11.
The number 11, yes.
The 47 had damage.
The 47 had damage, but the majority of the races, the Lamborghinis were able to stay ahead of the Porsches.
There were other possibilities like Lexus. The number 12 Aim Holden Lexus was a favorite among many, but they had mechanical problems that took them to the garage for a long time. I mean, you name it, Frankie DiCalvo, Aaron Telich, Jamie Giesberg, and Townsend Bell. Those are great drivers, but they just couldn't flash with a car that wasn't working on their end. So that happened, and the 14 had issues with handling, so they were out of the picture. But I will give Kyle Busch credit; he did a great, superb job in his 24-hour racing debut.
He did good, and a lot of people were criticizing it, which people just shut up about it.
Yeah.
Just don't criticize people.
So now let's move on to what's to come later. So we just talked about the Rolex 24 Daytona.
So, by the way,
Hmm?
about the Rolex 24, if you're asking about the points, they're actually they announced last season there was not going to be points awarded at Daytona, so everybody has 0.
Okay.
Sebring, you get points. So
Right. So yeah, let's get into that. So the next race is not until March 21st. Does that mean the cars in IMSA aren't racing at all? Absolutely not. There are many races going on that you'll see those same cars run at, like including as early as this weekend at Bathurst or
the Lone
the
Star Lamont,
WEC.
yeah, the
You
Lone Star
name it,
Lamont at
Asian Lamas. They'll be out there.
in
But
February.
as for the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, they will not have another race until March 21st at the 12 Hours of Sebring, which will be round 2 of 12. And for the Michelin Endurance Cup, it will be round 2 of 4. And by the way, when it comes to the points being awarded, it's only for the Michelin Endurance Cup. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
to the 12 race championship, it doesn't count. However, to the 4 race Michelin Endurance Cup, it does count.
Okay.
And if you're not familiar with that, the 4 races in the Michelin Endurance Cup are 24 hours of Daytona, the 12 hours of Sebring, the 6 hours of Watkins Glen, and the 10-hour race at Road Atlanta, which is known as the Petit Le Mans.
Yep.
So basically, round 1, round 2, round 6, and round 12 at the very end.
Yep.
So yeah, there is that. Great race. It's definitely fun to watch. If you pulled the all nighter, it was definitely worth it.
And also, if you had the sports app in the United States for when it went off air, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's quickly get into Monster Energy Supercross, as there was one race that took place the past weekend.
Yeah.
We're not gonna spend too much time on it, but round 4 of the 17 race tour was in Glendale, Arizona.
Yep.
Ken Roxon won in his Honda over Kawasaki's Eli Tomac, Jason Anderson, Husqvarna, Cooper Webb in the KTM, and Justin Barsha in the Yamaha.
Yeah, baby. And now Ken Roxon has a 9-point lead over. Wait, is it a 9-point lead?
It's an 8-point lead.
Yeah, it is. He has an 8-point lead over Eli Tomac, an 81-point lead over Justin Barsha,
and 78 points claimed for
points over Jason Davidson, and 72 points over Cooper Webb.
Yeah, that's a great lead for Ken Roxon, and he's got what it takes. His career is known for injuries derailing him mid-season. I feel like if he just keeps the momentum going, it's going to work out in his favor.
Yeah.
Please let him work out in his favor.
And that will carry on, of course, into round 5 of 17 this weekend in Oakland, California. So he's got to get his A game on for sure. Yes. That is for then. Now let's get into our upcoming race of the weekend. It's for those of you in North America, it's on Saturday afternoon, early afternoon. I don't know exactly what time the race starts.
I'm checking.
And of course, in Australia, it's on Sunday before sunrise. It's the 12 hours of Bathurst, the Liquid Moly Bathurst 12 hours for 2020. It's going to be a great race. The Bathurst 12 hours, Mount Panorama, is the same place that hosts the Bathurst 1000. And the first event was in 1991. It will be the 18th running of the Bathurst 12 hours, because there were some years that the race wasn't held. 1996 through 2006, there were no Bathurst 12 hours. However, there was a Bathurst 24 hours in 2002 and 2003. So the first race in the Bathurst 12 hours was held in 1991, and the winners were Nigel Arkle, Peter Fitzgerald, and Alan Grice in a Toyota Super Turbo back in 1991. They claimed the win by racing a grand total of 242 laps across the mountain. On the most wins category for drivers, John Boa leads that list with 3 victories from 1995, 2010, and 2014. And then these drivers have 2 wins apiece. Gary Walden, Rod Sandman, Damian White, Gary Holt, Paul the Dude Morris, Christopher Mees, Daryl O'Young, and Craig Lowndes. And for manufacturers, the most victories comes from Mazda in 1992, 93, 94, 95. They won 4 straight. And then Audi has 3 victories, while Mitsubishi, BMW, and Ferrari have 2 apiece. There's a special pole award for the Bathurst 12 hours in the memory of Alan Simonson, who was killed in the 2013 Le Mans 24 hours, called the Alan Simonson Pole Position Trophy, which was created in 2014. And these pole winners included Mauro Engel from the first year that it was awarded, Lawrence Vantor, Shane Van Gisbergen, Tony Vielander, Chaz Mostert, and Rafael Maricello. And in 2014, the gap was less than 1/10 of a second for the pole, which was very close. Lawrence Vantor set the fastest ever qualifying official time lap around Mount Panorama in 2015. Obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen and Scott McLaughlin would kill those lap times in years to come.
Yeah.
Trying to calculate.
So let's take a look at the entry list, and for the Bathurst 12 hours.
It's actually not afternoon for US. Wait, let me check. I gotta check this again. Schedule. Just checking. Okay, the race starts at... Okay, it is afternoon for us. I thought it said 5:45 p.m. over there. That's 5:45 a.m. for them. So, us will be... U.S. is going to be 1 Eastern. 1 p.m. Eastern time. On Saturday, because for them it's Sunday morning.
Right. The race actually... Here's a fun fact. The Bathurst 12 hours starts in the dark in Australia.
Yeah, for them it's 5:45 a.m. over there.
Think about that. Nighttime, darkness, everybody heading into the first few turns of a fairly skinny track going up a hill.
But then
that must take guts to do, in my opinion.
But then them ends in the day, while over here it ends at night.
I think it ends around 2 or 3 in the morning for us.
Which, on that Sunday anyway, will be Super Bowl 54.
Right. So let's get into the entry list that we have for this event.
Whoops. Oh, why am I still in the schedule? Okay, there.
So the classes are like this. You have the GT3 class, and it's broken down into
3 categories.
3 categories for Class A, which is for GT3. You have the P for Pro Cup, S for Silver Cup, and PA for Pro Am Cup. So there's subcategories in that class.
You also have the A Silver, which is the GT3 Silver. You also have C GT4, which is GT4s, and the INV is Invitational.
So yeah, Class C is pretty much GT4s, and Class I is Invitational, which is they don't really have a spec.
Yeah.
It's just, whatever car that they want you to come in with is what you have.
Don't bring that in. Nope. That's
you want to race the Chevy Cavalier, go to the Champ Car Endurance Series.
Please don't.
But yeah, so you got your mixture of GT3s, GT4s, and touring cars. Should be a fun race. Let's go into the list here. So, Alabama Motorsport number 1 and number 12. In fact, they have 2 cars. They're traditional Alabama Motorsport, which is owned by the Kiwi driver himself, and EBM/NDD Racing Team, which is actually a subcategory from the U.S. But they make up 2 Porsches, number 1 and number 12. For Earl's team, he has himself, Craig Lowndes, and Lords Vantort, which immediately screams a contender right there. And then you have number 12, David Calvert-Jones, Romeo Dumas, and Jackson Evan. So actually, Earl Bamber Motorsport number 1 is a Pro Cup class, while EBM NED Racing Team, I don't want to say class, but category, because they have the same power. EBM NED Racing Team number 12 is in the Pro Am category. Audi Sport Team Valvoline has 3 entries, all in the Pro Cup category. Number 2, you have Christopher Haas, Dries Vanthoor, and Frederick Versvich. In the other car, you have Mirko Bartolotti, Christopher Mies, and Garth Tander. You have Mattia Drudy, Kevin van der Linde, Marcus Winkelhock, which have great competitive drivers in each of those cars. I think they're a good contender to win as well in those 3 Audis. Then you move downwards, you see teams like Grove Racing, which have Benjamin Barker, Brenton Grove, and Stephen Grove, which I think they're related to one another. I have to double check. I'm pretty sure they are. Oh, it's Grove Racing, so they definitely are.
Yeah.
And they're in a Pro-Am. Let's move downwards. Wall Racing, Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo, Adrian Dietz, Tony D'Alberto, Cameron McConneville, and Jules Westwood. That's your first silver car on this list. Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo. And how about Bentley? I always wanted to see a Bentley race in the 24 Hours of Daytona, maybe for another year, not this one. You have two pros coming in here. Number 7, number 8. You have Jules Gounon, Jordan Pepper, and Maxime Soulet. Alex Buncombe, Oliver Jarvis, and Sebastian Morris at number 8. Hillmark Racing has a team that has supercars drivers, Mark Cini, Dean Fiore, and Lee Holdsworth. They're Pro-Am. KCMG. Number 18. This is a Nissan GTR Nismo GT3. Another GT3 I wish could have raced at Daytona. Alexandre Imperatoni, Eduardo Liberardi, Joao Paulo de Oliveira. And in the 35 car, you have Suigo Matsuda, Katsuma Chio, and Josh Burden.
Bostic Australia, number 24, which is a Audi R8 LMS GT3 in the A Silver class, has Tony Bates, Jeff Emery, Max Twig, and Dylan O'Keefe.
Yes, that's right. Looking down, we have Hub Auto Corsa, Ferrari 488 GT3 with Tim Slade, Daniel Serra, and Marcos Gomez. And then you have a Trofeo Motorsport, which is a Lamborghini Huracan GT3, Dean Canto, Grant Denyer, Leon Talbot, and Marcel Zolua. And here's a team that might be a great contender right here. Honda Team Motril, number 30, NSX GT3 Evo, Dane Cameron, Mario Farnbecker, Ranger Vandersen. Those guys know how to qualify a car. They definitely have what it takes to win. And how about this team right here? These are guys that won this past Sunday from Daytona. Chaz Mostert, and then you have Nicky Katzberg and Augusta Farfus in the BMW M6 GT3 for Walking Horse Motorsport. And then Black Falcon. They know what it's like to win.
Mm-hmm.
You have number 46, number 77. So number 46 is actually a silver. And the 77 is a Pro Cup entry. You have Sergey Afanasev, if I said that right, Patrick Asenheier, and Michelle Beretta for number 46 in the silver entry. And the 77 is Yelmer Berman, Mauro Engel, and Lucas Stolz. The Mercedes AMG GT3 for the 46 and the GT3 Evo for the 77. So basically, one of them has the new 2020 design. I'm not going to go through this list all at once, but you can see that you have Team 59 Racing. They have two cars, one in the silver, number 59, number 60 is the Pro.
With the EMA Racing.
That's a McLaren. By the way, that's another interesting absence that we didn't see from Daytona, because we saw McLaren's racing at IMSA last year, their GT3, but they didn't race Daytona last year nor this year. However, as they announced last week, that they will come full force into the Bathurst 12 Hours, and here they are. So now, speaking of manufacturers, we have Aston Martin Vantage AMR GT3 for R Motorsports, a team from Switzerland. They have Oliver Caldwell, Luca Giotto, Marvin Kirchhofer, and then that's 62 and number 76, and they're both Pro Cup cars. Jake Dennis, Scott Dixon, and Rick Kelly. So Scott Dixon with a watch from the 24 Hours of Daytona will look for the Wickley Moly Bathurst 12 Hours trophy and an Aston Martin. So he was just driving a Cadillac DPI, the 5-time IndyCar champion. Will be with veteran supercars driver Rick Kelly and Jake Dennis in an Aston Martin. This should be cool. So moving on, you have Sun Energy One Racing, which is a U.S. team, has Dominic Bauman, Martin Conrad, David Reynolds, and Kenny Habul in a Pro-Am Cup category. So they definitely have some good drivers to win in the Pro-Am. Maybe even overall. I wouldn't be surprised if a non-pro car wins overall, especially since they have, the same power ranks. I believe. I might have to double check on that. You got Harps and Garth Wallen Racing with the Kostekis, Jake, and Kurt. No Brody, but you do have Brett Hobson and the number 96 Nissan GTR Nismo GT3. Moving down the list,
Garage 59.
This is another Aston. Number 159 is a silver. The 188 is a Pro-Am. And this is a team that might have the possible winner right here. You have 888 Race Engineering, Mercedes AMG Team 888. One Pro-Am, number 777 or 777, with Anton Di Pasquale, Nick Foster, Yasser Shaline, and Sam Shaline. They're two brothers. And the number 777 Mercedes AMG GT3 for Pro-Am. And for the Pro Cup class, you have Maximilian Gotts, Jamie Wincup, and Shane Van Gisbergen in the 888 Mercedes machine. I think they're going to be a threat to win, especially because you look at Jamie Wincup and Shane Van Gisbergen. They've won the Bathurst 1000 before. So they definitely know what it takes, and they've worked together in the past. Two more entries. We have the two Porsches, and they didn't get it done in Daytona. It's an absolute racing team. In fact, they're based in China, believe it or not, but they do have the Porsche factory drivers. So they have Matt Campbell, Matthew Jaminet, and Patrick Pile for the 911 Porsche. And the number 912 Porsche is the Matteo Caroli, Thomas Prenning, and Dirk Werner. And the last entry is Mercedes AMG Team Group AM Racing, which has Maximilian Buick, Felipe Fraga, and Rafael Marciello. So there's that. There's only two GT4 entries. You have the BMW M4 GT4 of RHC Jorgensen Storm, which is driven by co-owner Brett Storm, who's from the U.S. You have Danny Von Dongen and Darren Eric Jorgensen.
I thought it said Strom, S-T-R-O-M.
Oh, Strom, not Storm.
Yeah.
And then you have the number 19 AMG
with no
Mercedes.
drivers.
This is a GT4, so there's only two GT4s, and then the I class is for invitational events, and all of them seem to drive a Ford Mustang Mark II V8. You have T2 Racing, Mark Cars Australia, and GJ Motorsports. So there you have it.
Yeah, we have 4 of those. Yeah.
Let's come up with predictions.
Who's Brad Schumacher? What's the driver named Brad Schumacher?
No relationship to
this dude,
Schumacher family that we know from F1.
He's Australian, so.
All right. Let's talk about our predictions. So let's break it down into 4 categories for the GT3 Class A. We'll break down our Pro Cup winner, our Silver Cup winner, and our Pro Am Cup winner. And then for the 4th part of our GT3 Class A category, our overall winner of all the GT3s combined.
Okay.
And then we'll just make our predictions for the other classes later. So let's start with the Pro Cup winner of the Class A GT3. This is going to be a tough one because there's so many possible contenders here. You know, my prediction is going to be, I'm going to have the number 888 Mercedes AMG GT3 Evo with Max Gauts, Shane Giesbergen, and Jamie Whincup.
Okay.
For the Pro Cup GT3 winner.
For me, for the Pro Cup GT3 winner will be the number 1 Earl Bamber Motorsports, ran by Earl Bamber, Lawrence Venturi, and Craig Lowndes. They're gonna win.
It's gonna be a close match for sure. Now let's talk about our Silver Cup winners. The Silver Cup, you can break it down. I believe my Silver Cup prediction will be the number 96 Hobson Garth Walden Racing Nissan GTR Nismo with Brett Hobson, Jake Kostecki, and Kurt Kostecki in that car.
Okay, my pick is the number 24 Bostic Australia team, driven by Tony Bates, Jeff Emery, Max Twigg, and Dylan O'Keefe.
All right. So lastly is the Pro Am Cup. Let's break it down. Who do you have winning that class? I already know my prediction.
My pick is the number 12 NED Racing Team Porsche, driven by David Calvert-Jones, Roman Dumas, and Jackson Evans.
My prediction will be for the Pro Am will be the number 75 Sun Energy One Racing Mercedes AMG GT3 with drivers Dominic Baumann, Kenny Habel, Martin Conrad, and David Reynolds. And for our overall winner / GT3 winner combined of all the classes, my prediction will be the 888 Mercedes.
My pick for overall is the number 1 Earl Bamber Motorsport. Porsche.
Right. So what about our Class C GT4 predictions? I think I'm going to go with the RC Jorgensen Strum Racing BMW M4 GT4.
Me too, because I don't know who's in the 19 because of
right. And as for the Class I Invitational, they're all Mustang Mark II V8s. My prediction in that class will be the number 91 Mark Cars Australia with Aaron Cameron, Brock Feeney, and Nick Burkett.
My pick will be the number 95 Mark Cars in Australia, driven by Jeff Taunton, Bailey Hall, Warren Luff, and Brad Schumacher. And I want to see about Brad Schumacher. It only gave me a swimmer, which I don't think Brad Schumacher, the swimmer, is not racing.
No.
Yeah.
By the way, that team is actually called GJ Motorsport.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. Now let's get into some of our headlines. That we pretty much recapped Daytona and previewed Bathurst. Rick Rare Racing, of course, yeah, that was their first thing that we learned last week, actually, in the midst of the podcast, that they pulled out of the Daytona 20. All right, is it working now?
Yep.
Okay, good. So we talked about, of course, McLaren. They set up their Bathurst 12-hour teams. Let's talk about the Truck Series. In the last week, we heard that the Truck Series playoff format extended from 8 to 10 drivers.
Yeah.
And it will go like this. So instead of an 8, then a 6 and a 4, you'll have 10 and 8 and the 4.
Yep.
Is it the better move? Should they have kept it the same?
Like, I feel like it's good compared to the 8 because so many big teams like Kyle Busch, the 2 full-time trucks did not even make the playoffs, just because Ross Chastain and Tyler Ankrum in the top 20, but not in the top 10 points, got wins. That's the thing.
I feel like it's a good move, in my opinion, and I think the Xfinity Series should do the same. I'll talk about why for Xfinity in a moment, but as for the Truck Series, I believe that we need to give a little more in return for consistency. The fact that Matt Crafton, the champion, almost didn't make the playoffs at all, it's kind of mind-boggling. And even seeing like how the first round ended, that 2 drivers that were the best got eliminated. Now they have a chance to get back because there's 2 other drivers that are at risk as well, giving more some space in between the seedings. I think that's a good idea. And also, just 10 drivers is a better number. I mean, I don't like the round of 6. In my opinion, the round of 6, it's not fun because you don't have that many contenders racing for first place.
Yeah.
And this is where I want to get into Xfinity. I think there are too many drivers for the Xfinity Series playoffs. 12 drivers is too much. And especially if you look at last year, there was the gap between 12th in the points and 13th in the points was bizarrely wide. And we're talking about guys in weaker cars from small teams trying to compete to get in this 12 driver chase. I think 10 drivers would do better. That way we'll have more competition to get in. And those who are racing 9th and 8th in the points aren't going to just coast and settle during those stages of the year awaiting the playoffs.
Yeah, like, I was looking about the problem is there's not many different winners in Xfinity for some reason.
But if you can just take 2 drivers out of the playoffs, just do the same as trucks 10, 8, and 4, I'd say it'd be fine. But maybe, I mean, if there's more teams coming in, then I understand to expand it. But when they made the system in 2016, there were more competitive full-time drivers and competitive full-time cars.
But the thing is, it's not just that. There's not many repeat winners. There's more repeat winners in Xfinity than first-time winners, I've noticed. Like, Cole Custer and Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick.
The best 3 drivers of the series are gone.
Yeah. Like they were freaking winning so many races, and we wanted new winners, and would never happen.
We're going to get a lot of new winners in 2020, I feel.
And probably, yeah, but I hope there's no weird races where, Talladega, where someone forces someone below the line and somehow...
That was a rarity, in my opinion.
What happens if Joe...
Because usually you would get turned doing that.
Joe Graf Jr. is going to win then. In the 08.
You're blowing my predictions, man. Let's move down to what we have next. Tyler Ankrum has joined the JRM Xfinity program.
Yeah.
So expect to see him race a few times in that number 8 car.
But wait, we actually got the 8 confirmed. The whole Jeb Burns running the 11 races.
Or possibly another car. I don't know the deal, but maybe just know that Tyler Ankrum, he might race late models.
Yeah, or they might also put a 5th part-time car there, because the 1, 9, 7, and 8 are the full-time cars.
Right. There's more to come on that. Santino Ferrucci, welcome back to Dale Coyne Racing with Aim Vassar Sullivan. He is going to drive number 18 this year. He drove number 19 last year, but he's back, And I'm kind of glad because Santino Ferrucci won the Rookie of the Year. No, it was actually
Rookie in the Indy 500.
Yeah, Rookie in the Indy 500, I meant. And in the series as a whole, it was Felix Rosenqvist.
But he actually did good.
He did very good. He turned the dial. I've seen him mature a lot. He entered the IndyCar series last year under massive controversy from what happened in Formula 2. And he seemed to clean that all up with his behavior in IndyCar. And now, when I say behavior, I'm not saying like he should be under a microscope. No. He proved to the critics that he can handle himself in tough situations without blaming it on others. I like to see that accountability rise, and it has. He is definitely matured now. I think he's 21, 22,
Yeah.
around that age, and he's worthy of this contract extension with Dale Coyne Racing. So good for him. Now moving on, we do have the Winter X Games. If you saw, they were going on in Aspen, Colorado, on the ESPN networks. Chad Fitchum. So add to the list of Daytona 500 entries. Now we have Chad Fitchum and Carl Long's Toyota number 49. Can he make the race is the question. I think we now hit 43 entries for the Daytona 500.
I don't know if the 96 has been confirmed fully.
It seems positive from the reports that I hear that it is confirmed of Daniel Suarez in the 96.
We could get 44 if the 27 will enter again. Like with Sorensen, if they bring a second premium car, which they did a lot last year.
Right. We're going to definitely get into this next week when we talk about the Daytona 500.
Yeah, and the Daytona 500 entry will be out at the same time as the
Usually
class.
around next week.
Because during the final, like the Clash practice, which is on Saturday, there's the 500 practice starts then. So
right, they're going to have to unveil it from then. I know it's food season. We apologize for all the coughing.
Yeah.
So, let's move on. ARCA announced their new point system for 2020. There's basically, if you remember the 2011 realignment of how points were awarded in NASCAR, from 2010, you got 108 points. Now, what do you get? 46 points for winning race?
Yeah.
That's basically what's going on with ARCA. There's no chase, no issues, none of that.
So Ian's happy.
If you're watching Ian Press.
Yeah.
Check his videos out.
Yeah.
He's doing race reactions again.
Yeah.
Let's see. So there's ARCA. And speaking of ARCA, they're almost back. Let's take a look. Oh, big news in sports car racing. On Friday, the eve of the 24 hours of Daytona, IMSA plus the ACO, which holds the rules and regulations for the 24 hours of Le Mans, announced a prototype conversion concept called the LMDH, Le Mans Daytona H. They didn't announce what H means, but I'm kind of certain it means hybrid because they did talk about hybrid cars being part of the plan. This car will be a universal prototype that will compete for overall wins, and that will be both eligible to race in the 24 hours of Daytona and the 24 hours of Le Mans. This should be a very excited plan. In my opinion, I'm very excited to see this because the hypercars and the DPIs will be able to race together, which should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And of course, we're just a season away from hypercars too.
Yeah.
That will happen in 2021. All right, let's talk about what we saw because I know this isn't the longest podcast. We're sure going to have longer ones later.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have 54-minute podcasts. And it's not going to, and I hope the podcast is not long like the 3-hour one we had after Phoenix. That podcast after Phoenix was 3 hours. Like, after the 3-hour podcast we had after Phoenix, I was like, just really? 3-hour podcast? I'm like, just sitting there. Hopefully the podcasts are not too long, but it depends of all of all the races going on. If there's not too many races, we're good. But if we have too many races, the podcast will be long.
All right. So I think this is a good stopping point for the podcast. But before we go, I would like to send my condolences to those affected by the tragedy that happened yesterday in the passing of Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and as well as 7 others that had their lives taken away in a helicopter crash in California. It was a very sad moment. It hits hard for a lot of us, whether you like basketball, watch it, or not. Kobe Bryant was a household name to many, including myself. And Jeremy Treatment, if you're watching this, because I know for those who remember watching in June of our podcast, we were going to have him on. Unfortunately, we had Google Hangouts, and they were ridiculous with the technical difficulties. We just couldn't get him on. But we have close ties with the play-by-play sports broadcasting camps, and Jeremy Treatment is the co-founder of the camps, as well as my manager for just a week job in June of every year. Jeremy, we're thinking about you. It's been a tough last day for all of us. So we'll see you next week for episode 44 of the Below the Yellow Line podcast. We'll talk about the Bathurst 12 Hours and preview the Daytona 500 as well as Speed Weeks. With that said, have a good one.